On today's episode of Open at Microsoft, I have Neil with me and we'll be talking about Portainer. If you're using container, Kubernetes, and all those good things, stay tuned for more. Hey Neil, super happy to have you on the show. So can you tell us more about Portainer?
Sure, and great to be here. Portainer started life as a pure open source project. It has been around now since late 2016, if I can recall correctly. So it's been around a while. It started out really in the really early days of Docker, when I was trying to get myself personally to take that mental leap from the world of virtualization to the world of containers. And I thought at the time, this technology is amazing. It's going to change the world. It's going to have the same impact on technology that server virtualization had way back in the 2000s. It's going to have the same impact, but it's quite a hard technology to learn. So Portainer started out as an open source project. It still remains open source, but we're now an open core company. The open source product is 29,000 GitHub stars, if I'm not mistaken. And just shy of 1 million active monthly users using the product.
So I'm one of them.
It is a very, very popular tool for home users, technology enthusiasts, and companies to enable them to gain access to the power of containerization. I was going to say Docker there, but it's significantly more than that. Without necessarily having to go deep tech and truly understand the mechanics of how containerization and an entire platform works. Portainer's whole goal is to simplify your experience of the technology, making it available to the masses.
So Docker container, when we think about that, we usually think about console and commands and a lot of text and stuff like that. So your tool is providing a lot of UI and ease to navigate, even if I'm not really sure what I'm looking for. Is it right?
Yeah. If you think about the technology that underpins containers, Docker, Podman, Docker Swarm, Kubernetes, they're all very either API heavy or CLI heavy, command line heavy. They all have a large number of commands that you need to remember with the right command context, with the right command case, single dash, double dash, all these different syntaxes that you need to remember. There is a lot of knowledge required to operate these. Now, if you don't possess that knowledge today, doesn't mean that you won't tomorrow, but if you don't possess the knowledge to run the command line today, it makes discovering capability more challenging. And so Portainer is a really nice way to show you on a nice graphical web page everything that's possible with the underlying orchestrator. Obviously, paraphrased or transformed so it's easier for humans, but you see this vast array of capability and you're like, oh man, I didn't know Docker could do that, didn't know Kubernetes could do that. So that it's this great unlock showing you. And behind our UI is in fact the API and the CLI, but you don't have to try and remember. If you don't know the command to do -- help in a command line, then how do you even start? If you don't know the command that you need to Google, how do you understand this? How do you go and learn about it? So, Portainer's job is to make it very easy to discover the vast array of capability that the underlying platforms provide you.
That's great. And I'm sure you have some demo and stuff like that. So we're talking a lot about how Portainer helps. Maybe you want to share a little bit more how it looks?
Yeah, okay. I have a simple graphic first.
Okay, let's do that.
This is actually, I suppose, the most important thing to understand, right? So Portainer sits in between your users and your systems. So Portainer acts now as the single cohesive interface. So all of your users, any external tooling that you want to use, interfaces with Portainer, and then Portainer interfaces with all of the back-end infrastructure. So any container runtime, any cloud provider, on-prem, any Kubernetes distro, it doesn't actually matter. As long as we can manage the container platform, we have access to the Docker APIs or the Kubernetes APIs, we can manage it. Portainer itself runs as a container. The the footprint of it is tiny. I think it's like one CPU and 4 gig of RAM will run 100 nodes, 100 cluster nodes or 100 bespoke container environments, not pods, the physical infrastructure. So it's really, really lightweight. It's not SaaS. You run it in your infrastructure, so you run it securely behind your own firewall. You've got complete control of the environment. So users log into Portainer. Users are authenticated by any kind of external upstream authentication. So Azure AD, on-prem Active Directory, on-prem LDAP, whatever they want. They're authenticated with some external system. Once they're logged into Portainer, they are granted access to environments in the back end, and from there they can deploy and manage their applications. So this is where Portainer fits into the mix. We also have a academy, which is a great place to start if you're just getting into containers and Portainer. So we kind of have best practice installations, and we show you how to use Portainer to get running on Docker or on Kubernetes. And we even have a Portainer reference architecture for those technologists that really want to understand how Portainer works under the covers. So this is cool. quite a useful reference point if you need to try and understand how to get started with containers. Portainer is the most powerful for those who are just getting started and absolutely want to bootstrap their experience. This is by far the fastest way to get started. So Portainer actually looks like this. As I said, it's a web UI. And as you can see here, I have a bunch of environments already defined. I have the Portainer server that is simply running on a single Docker host. I then have a standalone Docker server, which you might want to run, I don't know, in a DMZ or some simple application deployment. I have here a Docker Swarm cluster. It's a cluster of 2 nodes, but it's Docker Swarm, so you can see here we can manage Docker Swarm. I then have a K3S Kubernetes cluster. This happens to be a single node, but doesn't matter. Can be hundreds of nodes. And then we have another piece of capability, which is our edge compute, which is where we allow you to manage either Docker or Kubernetes environments out there, away from the data center, connected behind private networks, either carrier-grade NAT, 4G, or firewalls that you have no inbound access to. We can manage these environments anywhere out there on the connected internet without having to have inbound connectivity to them. So we've got this vast array of environments. Inside Portainer, you can I'll start with Docker, so you can come in and you can see things like containers. You can inspect the logs of containers. You can get a console. Now there's no console in this one, but you can get a console in here. You can see the stats of that particular container. So what's actually running in regards to the processes and what kind of I/O and memory is it using. You can actually go and deploy applications from Git. So we have a full GitOps engine built in. So it's designed to be the one tool you need. You don't need any external tooling. From here, you configure all of your GitOps pipelines and deploy applications from Git. So just a really, really simple way to actually come through and use and configure the environment. One really interesting point with containers, there is non-stop articles around container breakouts, container compromises, privileged escalations of security, because most people have this assumption that because it's Docker or Kubernetes, it's secure, whereas in fact, out of the box, it's not all that secure. It's not actually secured much at all. And you can actually, a hostile user or a hostile container that an internal user accidentally runs can very quickly compromise and take over your entire environment. And so we make it quite simple to actually go and turn on a bunch of protections in the environment that will not allow dangerous actions to occur in the platform. So, unless of course you're the admin and you particularly want to do that, but for regular user accounts, we strongly recommend turning on all of the settings. And we have this for both Docker and Kubernetes. So it's just a nice way to actually secure your environment. Same thing with Kubernetes. We can come into the Kubernetes environment and you can see namespaces that are in here. We can come in here and see applications that are running. In this case, this is just an empty cluster, so you're only seeing the system resources. But again, we can come in here and say, okay, look, here's the Portainer agent. You can see the internal IP addresses. You can see the ports that are being exposed through node port. And same thing, you can see stats. You can see logs, and you can get a console. So the whole thing is to make it super intuitive as to what's going on.
Response is good also. Like it's very snappy in terms of response time.
Oh, 100%. It's basically a web front end, right? So it's pretty easy.
I used in the past tools and it was not that fast, so I appreciate that it's responsive pretty quickly.
We're quite fans of enabling people to be effective and productive regardless of their base level of skill. And so we like to have this no-code deployment UI. So if you don't know how to write Kubernetes YAML or even Docker Compose, if you don't know how to write it, we don't want that to be a barrier to entry. So we actually let you use our form-based tool here where you can actually come and deploy applications on Kubernetes without needing to know how to write a single line of YAML. Now, is this an anti-pattern to Kubernetes? Absolutely. Is it a great way for someone to start to learn how Kubernetes works and how to deploy? Absolutely too. So we've got this form-based UI, and then we have our GitOps and Manifest and Helm-based deployments. So now you can come in here and deploy things. Turn on GitOps updates, set your reconciliation loops, and do whatever you need to do to actually make your applications get deployed and running from one central place. So just a really, really simple way to actually discover what's going on in a cluster. You can see your nodes, see your resources. So this is the kind of thing.
I think it make Portainer very accessible to like the person who say, yeah, container looks awesome. I'm not sure how to get started. So they have this. And then the tool grow with you as you say, okay, now like I want like something a little bit more robust. I want some automation. I want some like adding layer of, production level complexity and stuff like that. I feel like that tool can help you. And now I know how to write my YAML. So obviously it's faster than like using a form, I'm assuming. Yeah, I really like that. It's pretty good.
Yeah,
and there's an extension also, right? I know on my laptop, I use the extension Portainer. Is it the same? Is it exactly the same as the one that is in the container, or there's
not
difference?
exactly the same because it's designed to run inside Docker Desktop as an extension. It runs in single user mode. So all of these kind of user settings have been disabled in the extension because you can't authenticate in the extension. The extension just runs and starts. So we have created a user with auto login for the extension. So when you click the extension, it auto logs you into the Portainer instance as a built-in internal user. So but functionally it's pretty similar. You just don't have some of the full role-based access control capabilities.
That's great.
One interesting thing for Microsoft people is we actually have support for Azure ACI as well. ACI is actually quite an interesting product that doesn't get much love, but it's a really nice way to run Windows-based containers in the cloud without having to worry about any kind of orchestration layer across the top. So we added support for ACI a long time ago, and we actually have quite a few people using this, surprisingly. So it seems to be the way that people like to run Windows-based containers versus trying to run a Windows platform themselves.
Oh, I didn't know that. So Azure ACI is for Azure Container Instances. So it's when you have one container, just like sharing. I know this. I use those for like in some logic apps. So integration flow, I use Azure instance, kind of Azure Container Instance. So it's useful. Just acronyms is always hard for people. So that's why I specify it. I didn't even know you had a plugin in a Portainer. So I have so much to discover.
Yeah, there's lots of deep integrations. We want to try and make Portainer the one tool you use to deploy your container-based applications full stop. Where you run them, how you run them should be irrelevant. The fact that you have an application that runs in containers is all that we want to know. And then we'll take care of all of the infrastructure abstraction for you. So we'll take care of saying, okay, well, this actually we're going to run on Docker, this we're going to run on ACI, this we're going to run on Kubernetes. Okay, this one we're going to run at the edge or on-prem or whatever. The actual infrastructure mechanics are almost irrelevant to the operators of Portainer. So if you think about the layers of engineering operations, most people these days are familiar with platform engineering. A platform engineer's job is to take care of running the infrastructure and provide the tooling to the upstream developers or application owners so they don't need to worry about the infrastructure layer. And that's what Portainer does. It acts as this proxy in between deep technical and up into user space. So from our perspective, as long as a user can deploy their applications, we'll take care of all of the infrastructure under the covers.
So for people who would like to get started with Portainer, like where they can get it, how they can help and or contribute or like give back a little bit. So how does that work?
So we are obviously on GitHub, as you would imagine. So github.com/Portainer. So that's where you find us. That is the home of the Portainer Community Edition. And so we get a lot of feature requests. We get a lot of bug reports where people need help. Interestingly, I would say more than half of the bug reports that we get are just an understanding issue. And so we're an understanding of how containers work versus virtual machines. And so we're still working really hard on trying to remove the need to ask those questions in the product. The product should be more intuitive for those that need a helping hand to understand this technology. So there's lots of feature requests in there. There's bug reports and issues and questions. It's a pretty vibrant community. So jump in there and ask questions and engage with the community. If you can help others, help others. So that's always valued. With over 1 million monthly users, you can imagine the actual support load to support that community. Any help we get from people who know more than the person asking the question is always greatly appreciated.
Wonderful. Well, we'll make sure to provide all the links and information in the show notes. Thank you a lot for coming on the show today. And we'll make sure to have you back again for more details about Portainer. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.